Mary. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. May the 9th, 2016 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Moved by Councillor Coco, seconded by Councillor Mary as presented. Any discussion? None. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Regular council meeting minutes from May the 9th. Councillor Mary, Councillor Coco. Discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. May the 16th, 2016 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. Councillor Mary, Councillor Coco. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. May the 16th, 2016 Special Council meeting minutes. Councillor Coco, Councillor Mary. God, I don't like that kind of variety, huh?
Yeah.
Discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Heidi! It's your last meeting. Oh, yeah. So, apparently there's something later, but on behalf of council and the District of Lanceville, I'd like to thank you for your service over this. How long has it been? 6 months? 3.
You can't stay another 3?
It feels like 6 though, doesn't it?
Only once she got to meet me. After that, it was all downhill after that, although today she didn't ride her bike, despite the fact that it's downhill. So, like I said, on behalf of council and the District of Lanceville and the residents, thank you very much for your time here. I appreciate it. You're welcome to visit anytime.
Thanks. And the good news is she's been helping us to, I would say solicit interns for next season too.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Now, you can have a little bit of a vacation before you head home? Yeah? Any place in particular you're going?
Afterwards, I go to Vancouver for a few days.
Okay.
But I think that's the most beautiful place in the world.
Come back anytime. Well, again, thank you very much, Heidi. Brad.
Just a couple of comments, Your Worship. Heidi's been very helpful to the staff working with management, as that was her role to go through and be mentored. I know she spent a significant portion with Shirley, but has also spent some time with Jeannie. Apparently, my only criteria is that I have to bring in my dogs tomorrow so she can see them. Apparently, I get ticked off the intern criteria. So.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, next item, Mayor and Councillor verbal updates. Kind of run the table here. Councillor Swain?
Nothing.
Councillor Hain?
Just a question to staff. Next week is the town hall meeting, is that correct? Is it June 2nd?
Yeah.
Yes. Will we get to see the mail out prior to going out? Just based on past experience or the issues?
That will be handed out and actually should have been added as a late agenda item.
Ah.
The agenda.
Okay, so we'll get that now?
Good point,
Like I
Mr.
didn't
McRae.
give you enough mail, right?
Yeah. So, are you looking for feedback on this prior to being completed?
It's through Your Worship. Staff has been working quite diligently to not only prepare the presentation, but also capture the presentation as per council's comments for the motion that came forward on the April 25th, unless I'm corrected. So what staff has done here is they have essentially captured the PowerPoint as well as leading up to the impetus of what is the water master plan and moving forward. Staff recognize that it's not just about the water master plan. There's multiple facets that are supposed to be in the town hall meeting as the specifics were that is about water. So staff have captured what we believe is a fulsome picture of the past, present, and future in regards to Lanceville water and options. So with that, if council wishes to make any comments, we do appreciate it, with the understanding that we would like to get this out as soon as possible so the residents have time to absorb and ask any questions.
Okay, so will you give us a date or what kind of time? Just because the last one had so many errors in it that it would be nice to have one that's accurate.
It's at your discretion how soon you want it in the mailboxes. If we take it over to the post office tomorrow, it's usually within the mailboxes in a couple of days. So if we don't take it over until Friday, it may not make it.
Well, we can just raise the issues that we have points with at the town hall meeting, I guess. If there's any issues, we'll bring them up there.
Staff have, through your worship, and I appreciate that from Councillor Hames, staff have made every attempt to make sure that this is, pardon the cheesy phrase, the facts and nothing but the facts. So we have gone through basically all the reports and presentations that have been given to council, plus reiterating what the Water Master Plan is set to accomplish.
And I would just we would welcome comments from council between now and early next week, because that would possibly adjust the PowerPoint presentation, which this is based on, the content in the PowerPoint presentation.
Thanks.
Councillor Colclough.
Sir, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Who's doing the presentation?
Through your worship, it's a combination between myself, the Director of Public Works, Coors, and I believe the Mayor will be entertaining some of the pieces of the PowerPoint. However, in saying that, staff will conclude with a 30-minute presentation. Once that's done, we turn it over to council, and it is council's meeting until the conclusion.
Councillor Colclough.
We had our first gardening workshop last Saturday morning, which was a smash success. We had about 60 people, fantastic speaker, and incredibly delicious goodies from Recess. So all-round success. And another one coming up this Saturday, which is on rainwater harvesting, storage, and irrigation systems. And of course, the last is on June 18th, which is on water tolerant plants. Okay.
Councillor Neary.
And please report, Worship.
Councillor Coulson.
In trolling the internet this morning, I found a grant program, Canada 150 Community Infrastructure Program. It provides up to $500,000 for funding for a variety of community infrastructure programs. Examples are parks, recreation trails, community centers, cultural centers and museums, and so forth. Deadline is June 22nd, 2016. How do we monitor when these kind of grant programs come around? I'll ask that as a question to staff.
Just one note on that program.
Yeah.
It was just announced.
Okay.
Okay.
I have no idea. I
Just
didn't
factual.
catch that.
Yeah. That one is a second piece, because after you emailed me, I researched it a little bit. That's a second piece of the Canada 150 program, and it was encompassed apparently in a vague way in the March federal budget.
Yep.
And now they've come up with the structure for it. Yeah, which apparently is, and I don't recall the dates of the previous one, but first half of Canada 150, when it was the Conservatives, did effectively almost the same thing. Kind of surprise, here it is. But anyway, that's specific to that. Mr. McCarty, with respect to generally, where do we get information on the grants and announced grants, et cetera?
There's multiple places we check, including federal websites, provincial websites, our relationship with the ministries. We do get emails out. Municipalities are put on mailing lists where they come out. We also actively seek out grants according to what specific programs, projects, etc. that we are working on at the time or in the future.
Okay. I'm just thinking what that should be, because it's a very tight timeline, but as I quickly thought this morning, there's a number of things within Lanceville that could apply for that. The Bike Skills Park, the E&N Trail Extension, Coston Hall upgrades, Coston Hall rebuild perhaps. If you add in a wee museum to the Coston Hall rebuild, one might get extra credit and our application might look pretty good. $500,000 would go a long way in doing something with that building in some form or fashion. There's also other projects in the Parks and Rec plan that we got last year, I think, that could qualify. So I guess I would ask staff, is there anything that's suitable and ready to go that we could potentially put in an application for some of these funds?
Your Worship, the grants do get dropped on us from time to time. Capacity to have shelf-ready, if you will, projects. for the size of a landfill can be difficult at times. I can't speak to specific projects at this time that are shelf ready to go. I can speak to possibilities such as the bike park, such as other pieces we're working on, and saying that that is part of staff's workload to figure out how we can take best advantage of these grounds.
Okay. There was a similar one last year that went through $500,000 and we missed that. So I don't know how often these things will come around. Right now it's the current political favor from the new government, so it might not last long.
Yeah.
And so,
Councillor Gizabert.
I just would like to thank Trudy for the tremendous job she did at the Ken Spence and Tom Whips night. Tremendous planning, and I know she was running around, feverishly trying to accommodate everyone, and it's efforts like that that really make me proud to be part of this organization. And it was appreciated by everybody there. Well, maybe one person didn't appreciate something, but in general, it was a tremendous evening, and I want to thank Mayor Hain for his words and conducting, and it was a good night, and it was just all good vibes for Lansville.
Okay, for myself, just a couple of things. First off, it was my oversight not adding this to the agenda. Myself and Mr. McRae spoke about it this morning, and we said let's add it to the agenda and distribute it. So it was my oversight not remembering to amend the agenda itself. Certainly, if you come across something here, the ability to fully revamp isn't there. It's certainly clarification in that in a short time frame is there, and then we also have the aspect of the actual presentation itself. On the Canada 150, Councillor Coulson, when you emailed me this morning, I'd seen it just prior to that. A former student of mine is an MP, and he tweeted it out. And he's a Liberal MP, so it's kind of I'm assuming more or less kind of cutting edge of information. The ability for some of them is also the fact that there's a requirement for matching funds or something of that nature. So, something maybe like Skills Park, because we've already allocated money within the financial plan for it. Other more substantial items, such as a cost and haul redo, difficult under this program, certainly will be like the others. Provincial action coming up shortly. And thank you very much for the words with respect to last week. I know that a number of people approached me and said, great job, it was really well done. The crab cakes were perfect, important things like that. So it was really well done. Quite enjoyed it.
Should be at every meeting.
Well, that's if we don't get smoked salmon.
Well, just one other thing to add to that. One of the things that I really enjoyed and appreciated was the involvement of the Naas First Nation. That really added to it, both the history and the connections and everything. I had a pretty good time with that.
Great. Nothing else. Next item, Committee of the Whole meeting recommendations. The first one is issuing the 2016 request for proposals for Regina Lansville Water Master Plan. Moved by Councillor Neary, seconded by Councillor Polpa. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Second item, social media policy 3000-10. Moved by Councillor Polpa, seconded by Councillor Swain. Discussion. Councillor Hain.
Yeah, I didn't actually notice this the first time around, but on page 28 down at the bottom, the last paragraph of the scope, it states to the district council acknowledges that it is not their role to report directly on district-related business and will use their social media profiles and websites as a secondary information source. We can't regulate that. That violates the Charter of Freedom and Rights. I'm not really sure why we would put that in there. It almost sounds of censorship to me. So I'd like to actually see us take that out. Whatever people do, they do. Like, we can't stop any member of council from posting flyers about gardens to anything else. So I don't think it should be in our policy.
That's the last paragraph?
No, the last paragraph, the first line.
Councillor Coulson.
Along a similar line of thinking, I was just going to ask for clarification of what a social media site is considered, given that I have a website.
We have definitions per se, so Mr. McCarty, any insight as to the...
I think one has to take a look at the overall commented scope. It says social media profiles and websites representing members of council will not act as an official media platform on behalf of the District of Glencoe. All that says is that there's a disclaimer that the views are my own and not the views of the body. So to make the comments, if you have a Twitter personal, Facebook personal, website personal, that you make a disclaimer that this is the views of Councillor X and are not representative of the whole body of the District Council. That pretty much ends that.
But I think the concern was the preamble part of that.
And in my opinion, you can't force that on the council. You can't make them put something on their Twitter account.
Councillor Hain, please. I'm not sure if the concern, because I thought the concern originally was the first sentence of
It
that.
is, but it all kind of goes together.
Councillor Mary.
Could I ask for clarity? Which paragraph are we discussing?
Last bullet,
The
page 2.
last bullet, not the last paragraph.
Bullet.
Under scope.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
So I made that motion that we remove that paragraph.
The whole paragraph?
Well, council usually
Just
doesn't
for
show it
clarity.
to us. Well, primarily the first line.
The first sentence of the
Yeah, first
line?
sentence. I think everybody will do the other part.
If you remove the first sentence, the second sentence becomes redundant.
Yeah,
Okay, so what's your motion, Councillor Hain?
sure, remove the whole paragraph.
Submitted by Councillor Colson. Discussion. Councillor Hain.
Well, we already see this out there, not specific to even Councillor Colson's site, but there's other sites where there's information from the district put out there by members of council. It doesn't say, in my opinion. So I don't think you can stop any of that. So I just think to pretend we are is ridiculous. People are elected to express their opinions. They can put them out there.
Okay, further discussion.
Well, there's language elsewhere.
Sorry, Councillor Colson.
There's language elsewhere governing how we engage with the public. That all of our, we're not speaking on behalf of council when an individual member speaks. That's covered in other bodies and acts, and so this is totally redundant. It's not lawful. So yeah, I support removing it. If you keep it in there, I won't be following it. So
Yeah.
Further discussion. From my standpoint, I can understand the need or desire for the last sentence in there, recognizing the enforceability aspect, and it's kind of wiggle word sort of a thing, but kind of should as opposed to will. But if somebody, for example, has a social media site, for example, that has an identification of themselves primarily as, for example, a counselor, I don't see the problem with a disclaimer from that aspect. I don't see, I guess I don't see the harm in that regard, but recognizing the enforceability, that's why I would change the word will to should, or may, or
Consider.
something of that nature. Any further discussion? Councillor Mary.
Thank you, Worship, through you. I think there does need to be some reference to, I would agree with the last statement, there needs to be some reference to acknowledge or reinforce the concept that an individual's social media platform, whether it's Facebook or a blog or a website or Twitter is, in my opinion, and I would agree, I think it's policing this is very difficult. Even if you police it, the question is what do you do with issues where council feels that something's been said that shouldn't have been said. I guess council would have to cross that bridge when they come to it. And I certainly would support changing that wording from council will to council should, because at the end of the day, it's down to each councillor's own sense of responsibility to police themselves and ensure that they understand that what they state is their opinion in most instances, as opposed to a representation of the collective corporate body. So I can't support taking that paragraph out completely, but I am certainly willing to move an amendment that will remove a large portion of it. I think the introduction is, I agree with what it says, but I think it's kind of redundant because, as I just said, I think it's down to each councillor to understand that and to police their own activities. But I think it does need to be stated that we need to have an understanding and acknowledgement that we are stating our own opinions when we are exercising our right to free speech on our own social media outlets.
Councillor Gazza.
I think the problem that will arise is found in principle and agency law, that once council makes a motion or expresses its will, then that is the will of council. And if a councillor holding himself out as a councillor makes a representation to the public that a certain state of facts is true or false, it would be open to the member of the public to say, well, they've made a representation and I'm acting on that representation, and therefore I'm holding council accountable because that person is a councillor, they're an agent of the council, and they've said this, I've acted on that, now I want you to follow through with it. And I think what happens is that you run into an embarrassing, maybe at the least just embarrassing, that somebody comes here during question period, well, Councillor Colclough said, I didn't say it was just his opinion, and I want council to follow through on that now, and there could be legal consequences to that. So I think whether we put should or will, councillors have an obligation that if they're making a representation publicly, that it's either expressing the will of council if it's been adjudicated, if it's been expressed, or saying, I may not agree with that. My personal opinion is that it should have gone this way, and then people understand that we're not all going to be unanimous on decisions. And I think Councillor Haim is right that we still live in a free speech country to the most point, and I may really disagree with the decision here, and I'm gonna voice that, but it's going to be my opinion.
And following up on that, that's exactly what our legal counsel said. Freedom of Charter of Freedom and Rights gives every council member the right to speak against a council decision, even if it was endorsed by the majority of council. So you don't have to go out and spew the company line if you disagree with it. You still have the right to speak your point of view. Yes, the minutes are always there that speak to what the vote was, but every councillor has the right to still express their concerns and any issues they have with decisions of council. That's the human right.
Councillor Colclough.
So what's the motion right now?
There's a motion to amend, and I believe the motion is to remove the whole paragraph, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm okay if we just change it to should.
Well, let's do something with one motion.
Okay.
Yeah, I along the lines of Councillor Neary here, support eliminating the first four, leaving the second three and putting should. That I would support. I don't support your current motion.
An amendment?
We're on an amendment right now, so I suggest that we, because they're very diverse, we dispense with one amendment. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the amendment?
And then the
Sorry, just for clarity, I didn't have a main motion on the floor. This is a motion to amend the draft policy. And then there'll be a subsequent motion to, I'm assuming, approve as amended.
I think there was a motion to amend the policy, but...
I'm sorry, I just didn't, maybe, do you have the mover and seconder? I didn't have.
Mover and second for the motions.
Yeah. So we have the approval on the floor, motion to amend the policy as such, correct? That's where we're at?
Kane second by Colson.
Yes.
On the amendments, and then there's an amendment to the...
Not yet.
Okay, just making sure I got to the right point, okay.
Okay. We all have to speak.
So what are we voting on
The
then?
amendment, which would be to remove the last bullet of scope. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all is in favor? Opposed? Motion defeated, which gets us back to the original policy. Councillor Neary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move to amend the proposed policy by removing from bullet number 5 under scope the first sentence, which begins District Council and ends with based on this direction, and changing council will include to council should include, and in my opinion disclaim.
Okay, actually, before we're seconded, the second sentence becomes orphans, basically.
Yeah, it becomes the
So,
1, 2, 3, 4.
so the first four,
Fifth bullet.
no, but the second sentence itself, in that fifth bullet, is actually referencing the first sentence. So if you remove the first sentence,
You want to remove the first two?
you want to remove the first
It
two
says based on this
sentences.
direction.
I think that the sentence stands alone. Council will include an opinion.
What direction?
We're removing that.
Well, you're
Point.
removing that one?
Oh,
This-
so
No,
two
two
sentences.
Yeah.
Two sentences. Okay, now we're...
I thought it was a Roman sentence and
No.
I just see the period. I beg your pardon.
Good, okay, so we're talking the first two sentences.
Yeah.
Seconded by Councillor Henning.
But the last sentence will start with council should include,
Yes.
Yes.
consider include,
Should.
find them.
So it's moved by Councillor Neary, seconded by Councillor Henning. Discussion on that amendment.
If I may speak to that, I think I've already spoken to it, which I shouldn't have, but I think we need to state this. And I think we have to trust that council understand that their role is not to report on behalf of council, but to, make opinions publicly and separately.
Okay. Any further discussion? All's in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that's the amendment. Now the original policy as amended. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, next item 7A. We've got for us a report on standards from Coors Engineering, as well as the staff report with a recommendation. Councillor Haynes?
Yeah, I move the staff recommendation that no further changes are made to the water connection standards until the following conditions have been met as per the recommendations of the May 13, 2016 Coors and Associate Engineering Report. Specifically, additional supply has been connected to the system to augment or be replaced on standby to augment the current district water system if needed. Additional storage has been connected to the upper pressure zone and well field upgrades have been completed. And further that do you want the other one separate or apart? And further that council directs staff to utilize engineering best practices when determining the use for water connections other than residential.
Seconded. Seconded by Councillor Swain. Discussion on the motion. Bill, it's water, and there's no discussion. Perfect. Councillor Clark.
Well, I struggled a bit with this. And I think the first thing to point out is that this standard really only has any effect on peak day So technically it's 1 day a year, but it's actually probably 2 or 3. It's not one really hot, dry spell that we get in the summer. That's when this comes into play. And currently our standard is 3,400. Our actual usage on average is 1,500 to 1,600, so say 1,600. So it's almost 100% safety factor there. On top of the wells, when they're rated, also has a 30% safety factor in it. So we've got layer upon layer of safety factor here. And what we're doing is we're saying to people that for that 1 week a year when it's super hot and dry, we're going to let you sprinkle. Rather than say, we're not going to let you sprinkle, but we're going to allow all these other people that don't have water or don't have good water to connect to the system. So we're putting lawns before people. So I think the suggestion or recommendation was in the Coors report to go to 2,900 liters per day is a move in the right direction, recognizing that actual is 1,600. And I can't emphasize enough, what this means is we don't have water to give people who don't have any or don't have any that they can drink. Yet we're going to leave it the way it is so that people can sprinkle for that hottest week in the summer. And on principle, I don't agree with that. I think health and safety comes first, and I think people comes first before laws. So I'm not going to support that.
Well, I totally agree that people come first, especially health and safety. But let's be clear on what the Coors report does make for their recommendations. We hired a number of professionals, and they provided us with the recommendations on page 51 of the Coors engineering report. I'm just going to go through this so it's very clear as to how can we not support this recommendation. The Coors engineers, the CAO, and the hydrologists have all recommended that we continue improvements to the district's well field and aquifer before dropping water standards. We have not completed the improvements to the district's well fields. We're just starting, so why would we change anything? We don't know where we're going to end up or where we're going yet. They also recommend on that page, increase our reservoir storage within the district. Where has this occurred? We don't have a second reservoir up in the foothills yet. We don't know where the status of that is, so we haven't met that criteria. The third criteria, they said to me, is secure and integrate an additional water supply prior to adjusting the standards. We haven't done that. They're telling us what to do. We hired them, they're telling us. To my knowledge, the City of Nanaimo has not agreed to any changes to our water agreement, so we have no backup supply at this time. So if we support dropping water standards or going to 2,900 liters, we're sending a message to the City of Nanaimo that we don't need their water. We're going to have enough on our own. And I would hesitate to do that at this point in time when we've got an amended water agreement before them. I think it sends the wrong message, and it sends the wrong message to the residents. Basically, if we end up with the water agreement we have, we know it's subject to legal challenge. The fourth recommendation from Coors was proceed with any changes to the design standards on an incremental basis and only after improvements to the storage and supply system are made. So why would we be prejudging and doing this ahead of time? Again, they're telling us what to do. This one I found was quite remarkable that they put in their report. We have an engineering report and it says, strongly recommends on page 47, the district improves storage capacity within our system, especially within the upper landfill zone before considering revisions to the standards, especially in light of climate issues where the snowpack and rainfall so far this year is less than 2015. Last year, the residents were on stage 4 starting in May, June. Like a big chunk of last year, they had no water for watering gardens. There is severe restrictions. They're saying 2016 is going to be drier than last year. So putting 120 connections on, which is what this would equate to, would put huge risk for this community. Coors, in my opinion, then compared the water standards of landfill to other jurisdictions, which is not quite an apple-to-apple comparison. The other areas, as they cite in their report, all have storage capacity and backup systems. So they've got all these, and they say if we do as they tell us to do, we will be then on an apple-to-apple basis with those other jurisdictions. Because they have all those, then we'll have those. Then they support the dropping of our standards. You know, we pay for professional advice. I hope we listen to it. My bigger concern is if we expand our system right now and it fails, we do not have a backup supply for landfill, for lower landfill. The emergency water agreement is not because the council decided to move ahead and drop standards. It's only in the event of an emergency. So if we have to come up with the $4 million to pay for the lower landfill residents to get water, we have no ability to get that money. Stage 3 sewer is going to use up all of our borrowing capacity. We will not be able to borrow. So that to me is a huge concern. If we drop the water standards, and correct me if I'm wrong, just so I know, tomorrow, will developers be able to walk in the door of the district office and apply for those water connections? That's a question through to staff.
Through Your Worship, the current policy, my understanding is that it is based on a first-come, first-served basis. I don't believe that we have any regulatory nature at this time to limit how many connections an individual or an entity can take.
Correct. So who is really benefiting from dropping the water standards? Developers who are ready to connect now, which we know we've got now 3 on the horizon in this community? Or will this, this is going to be a good discussion that should go to the town hall meeting, dropping water standards. In our own mail-out, I see here at the very bottom, the current standard is conservative, which results in a theoretical deficit. So even right now, we're saying to the residents at 3,400 gallons per minute or liters per minute, we have a deficit. This limits the ability to extend the system to the proposed service area noted in the OCP boundaries. So we're about to mail this out, telling them 3,400 is a deficit, and yet we're going to create a bigger deficit. So I've got some real concerns with that. I guess my bigger one is, up to now, we've all been hearing at every meeting that we hire professionals, we have to listen to their advice. There's nobody on council that's a water expert. That's why we keep hiring people. We use the professionals to give us the advice. And to be honest, Coors did an excellent report of providing us with that advice. They're telling us. I've had already residents phoning me saying, what kind of precedent is being set by lowering the standards haphazardly? And what risk, if we did, and what risk is being placed on them for the benefit of whom? Who's benefiting by dropping these standards right now? And why the rush? So those are good questions. So I cannot support dropping standards, as Councillor Goldclough is saying. I say, let's follow the CAO's recommendation as we've done in the past, follow the engineer's recommendation as we've done in the past. That's what we said we were going to do, and I'd like a recorded vote.
Just wanted to correct, and it's not information that you would have. You made reference to, I believe, sewer phase 3 using up our borrowing capacity.
It may.
I asked staff today to give kind of a preliminary estimate of our borrowing capacity, and it's approximately, with a lot of approximates and estimates in there, about 13 million. Whereas historically back, I'd be guessing 04, 05, different interest rates in that at the time, it was about 4 to 5 million roughly.
But we'd be a highly leveraged community.
That's a qualitative perspective. Councillor Mary first.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's kind of difficult to follow the Councillor Adrian Patrick's speech. In large part, I agree with what has just been said. The report is quite clear in its recommendations. I struggled with this because I can see 2 sides to this argument. However, I think down the road we do really need to seriously look at this standard. I'd like to just clarify something that has just been said about the deficit. The conservative standard that we have adopted, or the district has adopted over the years and continues to employ, creates a deficit. My understanding is because it's so high. If the standard was lowered, so it's conservative upwards. Somebody's being very conservative about what we should or allow, because there's been a fear that otherwise we'll completely run out. And it's created a deficit. If the standard is lowered, it eliminates the deficit. Am I correct?
Through worship, yeah. The reason why, I don't know, some people don't like the phrasing, but the theoretical deficit is that, I hate to use a gender-biased term, but it is a man-made deficit.
Yeah.
We can, by the recommendation, lower it to 2,900, and that would, the deficit we've created, so that deficit would now decrease. The lower you create the number, the lower the deficit goes on to positive, et cetera. So your Councillor is absolutely correct.
Okay, thank you. So I think as things stand right now, I support the recommendation. Circumstances could change down the road for a variety of reasons, many of which we've discussed in recent weeks around this table. Factors that have yet to be followed through to their logical conclusion, for instance, the redevelopment of the well field and so on and so forth. The outcome of our agreement approach to the City of Nanaimo, that is going to have an influence on these kind of decisions down the road. I think it is a decision that we're going to have to address again. So I'm going to support this recommendation based on the report that I was given, which I understood. Thank you for whoever put this report together, because unlike the huge tome that Cruz produced originally, upon which a lot of this information is based, this I followed with great ease. It didn't faze me at all. And I've got to say that the recommendation that has resulted from it is repetitive. It's reinforced throughout. And basically what I'm reading is that this is not an unreasonable thing to do down the road. However, right now, I think it's not the right time. Not necessarily for all of the reasons that Councillor King might embrace. I could change my position down the road, but at the moment I'm willing to support this because I think we need to go a bit further down the road, explore the water plan, get that completed, find out what's happening with our secondary supply, which we have been pursuing ardently, and I will continue to pursue. I think we do need to do that. And of course, the idea of additional storage. I know that, this could lead, if we reduced it now, it could lead to, and that's a big could, lead to, as has been pointed out, developers who could actually be beneficial and bring advantages to our aims, especially around water. But I think it's a big could at this point. So I am going to be conservative on this and support the recommendation. And maybe we'll revisit it down the road. I hope we do.
Councillor Hopper.
Well, I'm looking at the standards, and I'm looking at the per capita requirement per household. It's nothing to do with adding new connections. We currently have a policy where we don't allow new connections because of supply and infrastructure deficits. We're also going into a water master plan. I have no expectations of approving any connections until after the water master plan is done. This is just about setting the standard. We still have to go through the water master plan process to decide. And during that process, we'll have our new wells online, et cetera, et cetera. So changing the standard does not equate to tomorrow people getting new connections. They're two separate things. I think that what this does is this indicates that, once again, that we're favoring lawns over people who don't have water. And I think we're on the right track with all the work that we're doing with the well rehabilitation, water master plan, et cetera, et cetera. The standard is much higher than it needs to be. So I think it would be a step in the right direction, and it would be a signal to residents who have no water or poor water or a combination of the two that we are looking to resolve those issues.
Councillor Swain.
Yeah, so speaking in favor of the motion, based on this most recent report, it's pretty clear that, for the path for this district to follow, based on the recommendations presented to us, including what our CEO has presented to us. I think this piece of work can definitely be used in the development of our water master plan, which is going to be completed in March of 2017. At this point, we don't have the infrastructure to even consider giving people water. So I think this whole notion of lawns before people just doesn't really apply at this point, because we don't even have the infrastructure to serve those residents. And I think that should always be on the top of mind. But at this point, again, I speak in favor of the motion, and again, the path is pretty clear.
For the first time, Councillor Paulson.
I'm not going to present in the correct order, but we need to get out of the theory world, right? We've got recent data that says the aquifer is capable of more capacity. We now have well 6, which delivers 100 gallons per minute more per hour. We need to actually determine what the supply capacity is of the aquifer. We haven't really tested it with these new pieces of information. So we can choose whatever standard we want, and if that water actually isn't available or from the aquifer, it's all meaningless. If you think of a basket of water, a bucket of water, and 100 straws in it right now, doesn't matter what the numbers are. You lower your standard 15%. What you're technically doing is allowing 15 more straws into that bucket of water. You're going to draw more water, period. Doesn't matter what your target is, doesn't matter what your maximum day demand is, you're drawing more water. If the water isn't available, or you're taxing it, you've now set a course of events in place which maybe is not that desirable. So, looking at these down the road, absolutely. But it's theory. We need to give it some time, have a good assessment of what the aquifer can do, and then have this conversation. I'm going to keep going here. In the staff report, page 31, midway down it says, modifying the standard by 15% is significant and feel it is an acceptable level of risk. What is that based on? What is the risk? How did we determine if it's acceptable? I'll ask that question to the staff, please.
Through your worship, the course report indicates again that you could go down to 2,900. That is equivocally stated in the report. Again, that's your 15% margin at that point. Given that our standards are very conservative, very high, versus determination throughout the research has indicated that you could go down to that level. That's about as much as I can speak to at this point.
But it says staff feels it's an acceptable level of risk.
Based on Coors' report.
Okay, so we're going to move to that then. On page 46, first big paragraph there, it says, if the district is going to adopt standards used by larger municipalities, then the district should consider approving redundancy within its water system. Good statement. So, in the next section there where they calculate the average day and maximum day numbers, they actually chose neighboring towns. Their logic makes sense. It's a valid comparison. But those are the larger municipalities. If you redid that exercise using Qualicum Beach, Courtenay, Comox, Campbell River, also neighboring municipalities, the logic for including them in an analysis is the same. You actually get a water standard that's higher, significantly higher than where we are. If you go to page 45, it's right there. In Qualicum Beach, 1780 maximum day, 2100 for Courtenay, Comox, Campbell River. Those are smaller municipalities. Their delivery abilities are similar to ours, probably. There isn't the redundancy that they spoke of in larger municipalities. And so we have to be very careful in how we interpret that number. I actually would like to question Coors on how they chose those 3 particular towns, given their comment above about adopting standards by larger municipalities. It's almost like we led the discussion for the results we wanted, in a manner of speaking. To the comment about lawns before people, that's not true. We have theoretically more capacity available in the aquifer. We now have pumps to supply more water. The question now becomes, what do we want to do with that water, if it is indeed there? So it's not as simple as saying lawns before people. What would be nice, we have the lowest per capita consumption out of all the municipalities compared to. Perhaps we do give a bit of water back to folks. Mr. Halliwell's here. A quarter of his garden died last year because he couldn't water his plants. Maybe we relax the water restrictions a bit in the summer. Give a little bit back to the people, give a little bit to new connections. If there is the 100 gallons a minute they were able to deliver from the pump, that's 200 connections based on our current standard. That goes a long way to new connections or relaxing our current stage water restrictions. I'll stop now for a bit.
Councillor Hain.
Okay, just a comment. The way I read this report about dropping standards to 2,900 is if we have the safety nets in place. They're not saying go ahead and drop to 2,900. They're saying if we have a storage capacity and a backup supply, like the larger jurisdictions do. And we don't have either of those things, so I don't think we can take from this report that Coors is saying, oh, go ahead and do it. That's not what they're saying. They're saying eventually we can get there, but we're not there yet. With regards to if we drop standards, yeah, it will allow people to come in and apply for connections. There's nothing that says they can't. We don't have any prohibition against that. If we're saying there's more water available, then they can. A bigger question I have is if we go ahead and say, let's drop standards right now to 2,900, what does that do for all our developers that are looking to develop right now? Does that mean now they don't have to come up with as much water? They now only need a 2,900 standard? We've just allowed them to increase their capacity in the same bucket that we're all in? These are big questions that the community as a whole has to consider and look at, and we have to get the information before we make that decision. Because that's my take on this, is really what we're looking is to try to find a way to maybe not do the lawns. They're not an issue. I think most people have given up on their lawns during the summer, but it's about getting more connections. And who are those connections for? That's the question. Who are the connections for?
Okay, Councillor Clausen.
I also have a problem with the way the motion is worded. And it might just be my interpretation, so I'd appreciate some clarification. So it says, no further changes are made to the water connection standards until the following conditions have been met, and so forth. Are we saying that we are actually going to lower our connections if we approve this motion? I prefer the way it's worded. No further changes are made to the water connection standards until the following conditions have been met. So could the logic be that we'll go out and meet those recommendations, and then we've already approved a lowering of the standard the way it's worded? That means I prefer them to be decoupled. I would like us to have a conversation on the standard. We might find that we can go lower than 2,900. Regarding the developers, I'll keep rambling here. Regarding the developers, if there's a complete decoupling from the Harvey Road aquifer, and I'll use the foothills water, really, theoretically, there's no reason they couldn't lower the standard based on the available capacity of water that they're drawing from. But it needs to be very well studied that there is indeed no interference on the Harvey Road aquifer, right? Having said that, back to this. I think council needs to have a separate discussion on what's happening with the standard, where it's going, and then discuss the conditions, recommendations, because that also impacts where we go with the water master plan, actions on that side of things. I don't want us to simply distill it into this. We're running forward to get augmented water because we are lowering our standards. That was the council motion. Right?
Mr. McCrae.
Yes, through your worship, in reference to the recommendation comment that no further changes are made to the water connection standards until the following conditions is met. This doesn't commit. This doesn't buy council that if this happens, therefore it's not a thesis statement at this point. It is when it happens, then council consider it. There's no numeric value put to this. It's when it happens, then you have the conversation based on these three things. Once these three things are accomplished, then council comes back to the table and decides what they're going to do. that it can be 29, it can be 10, it can be whatever council deems appropriate, but it doesn't lock you in it.
That's the way I read it. Still come back.
Yeah, I'm a little twitchy with the wording of these things, so thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Councillor Neary.
I'll pass it to address.
For myself, unlike Councillor Swain and Councillor Neary, I think it's great information in terms of moving forward. It's something that's been rumored about over the years, but there was never a report specific to it that's ever been done. A couple of things in it that make me twitch a little bit. The comparison to Nanaimo, but not necessarily for the same things with Councillor Coulson. For example, it talks about the increasing water rates. Well, in Nanaimo, they have increasing water rates as well. It's not just one rate. So I admit, because they calculate theirs on a different basis, I haven't compared the exact dollar figure for X amount of water comparisons, but they do have an inclining rate. I think more than anything, it's just the pure awareness. And one of the things, from my standpoint, about taking this on a step-by-step basis is that public perception can very easily change that awareness. And so, taking it as kind of a step-by-step approach so that people, we haven't got a lot of extra water. Still take it easy. Still use the low amounts, because realistically, the fact that people use low amounts is one of the reasons why we're able to look at this. So I think it's something that its time will come. There's some steps laid out in the closed report that need to be established. Developer versus resident, to me, a well's a well. And if for the benefit of the residents, we say that we're going to change our standards, that also by association changes the standards for the developer. So yeah, that's life in that regard. So like I said, not right now, but information for discussion, and certainly with regards to the meeting next week, there could be residents questioning and commenting on it in that regard. But like I said, it's good information, something to work towards, but there's some steps to do. Councillor Gilbert.
I can see Councillor Colclough and I are going to be out then tonight, so I'm not going to beat my drum on lowering standard. But maybe we should just stop beating ourselves up, kick in $1.3 million, turn on the tap to Nanaimo, then the developers don't have to worry about a lower standard. We don't need any standard because we've got all the water we want. Just flood it into our system. Shut down well number 6. Shut down all the wells. Let's just suck Nanaimo water. Why are we beating ourselves up? Let's get who's got the 1.3 million? That's a rhetorical question, by the way.
The 1.3 million one, or Councillor Haynes?
Well, I was just going to say we have a water agreement to deal with first. That's why we can't do that.
Perfect.
And actually, in the water agreement, we couldn't shut down the wells because it states in there we were maintaining our production.
Yeah.
So, catch you again. Councillor Coulson.
And there's a limit on the availability of water from Nanaimo. It's 47 liters per second, which works out to about 1,500 homes. So it's not an infinite water source like some believe.
Okay.
Based on our current standard.
Good job. Okay. Any further discussion? Oh.
Sorry. And I'll do a bad job. I played around with this afternoon while I was eating my grilled cheese sandwich. So I will send it out. Fred sent me the last 2 years' data for the extraction rate and the level of the aquifer. I actually plotted it with level here and rate here, and that's a 4th order polynomial fit curve. But it shows the cluster of how our aquifer level is versus the drawdown rate, right? And you can see quite clear. Sorry, I'll send this out, but you can see here it plateaus. And so my earlier comments about we haven't really taxed or tested the aquifer come back to this, because the methodology Fred uses uses to determine the water standards is based on some mechanism, subjective guidelines of what quote unquote taxing the aquifer means. So this may not be taxing the aquifer. We don't know. Sorry, folks.
But keep in mind when it comes to that, I mean, it's all, like even the information that we got from Coors and from Lowen, it's still theoretical.
Yes, absolutely. That's why we have to bridge from theory now into what's realistic. And that's where our margin of safety will come in, and that's when we start determining, the comment that we have enough water within the district to meet OCD build-out. What's that based on? What's the margin of safety? That then determines what you need for augmentation or backup supply, backup volume. We might find we only need 100 gallons a minute from the Nile, but we're going to pay for 225 connections right off the bat because of the way the agreement's worded, right? So there's decisions to be made once the capacity side is looked at in more detail.
Okay. Councillor Swain.
Yeah, just through the chair, I found it quite interesting in the report under, I guess it's page 35, third paragraph under background. There's, even though the report has to do with water standards, there's an opinion expressed about how we should go about increasing the capacity of our water system within the peninsula. So I think, this maybe it's just an indirect opinion that's more directed towards the water master plan and the need for such a plan before moving ahead with any kind of water changes. So I did find it quite interesting that they maybe snuck that in there.
Sorry, what paragraph?
It's under paragraph 3 under background or 1.1. Okay, page 35. Page 35.
Let's see if this.
And the second sentence, it says, having water sources spread throughout the district is not considered to be an economical approach in terms of managing infrastructure. So it's just an additional opinion thrown in there. It's nothing to do with standards, but I think it does speak to the need of our water master plan. And the first sentence you can read into whatever you want, and it's not necessarily directed to the district, but the second sentence, the way I read it, is directed to this district.
Councillor Cole?
Yeah, it's a good point. I look at that second sentence, having water sources spread throughout the district is not considered to be an economical approach. Don't know that economically it makes much difference, but it does provide redundancy in that you're getting water from more than one source. So if you've got 5 aquifers and one fails, you got a problem. If you've got one aquifer that fails, you've got a root.
But if you've got that centralized infrastructure, for example, your power requirements can be centralized as opposed to spread out. Reservoirs.
Reservoirs are better to have them spread out as possible. From an infrastructure perspective.
Well, no, but if you've got multiple wells out here, but you've only got one large reservoir.
Yeah. Rather than build 5 reservoirs, you build one big one. Right?
Until the earthquake happens.
But the economy scale. That's what
Okay, anything further on the motion? Okay, recorded vote, I believe was requested. All those in favor of the motion? Councillor Swain, Councillor Hain, Councillor Paulson, Councillor Neary, Mayor Hain opposed, Councillor Colclough, and Councillor Gisbert. Motion carried.
Where's my Twitter account? My Twitter account.
Okay. Investment policy. Staff, anything to add?
I guess I'm sure you council have any questions. Do you want me to do a quick review of it?
Oh, there's a couple of high points.
So currently the current investment policy that we have was written back in 2003, and it quite restricts what investments the district can make. One of the items in particular has to do with investments through the MFA. MFA offers multiple different investment options. Within that, our current policy restricts us to only one of them. So that is something that is quite unusual. For most municipalities, we want to invest in all of them. The other options usually have higher returns as well. And so one of the items that we're looking at is going, okay, how can we potentially increase revenue? And within the current legislation, we're quite restricted to what we can invest in to ensure that with all municipalities in the province that the principal is always secure. So it's all very low risk. But within the current policy, we are quite restricted. And so we have the potential to increase our revenue by doing some modifications to the policy that would allow other investment opportunities.
with no increased risk. Okay. There's a recommendation. Councillor is moving the recommendation. Councillor Henry, thank you. Second by Councillor Colclough. Discussion.
It makes total sense to me. I'm relying on Ms. Bosher to guide us on this. She's the expert in this arena, but what I've read here is just basic.
Councillor Griswold.
Can we buy gold bars?
No.
No?
Any further, Councillor Griswold? Councillor Hayden?
A couple comments. It states in here, interest revenue is expected to increase to how much? What level?
That is always a difficult thing to give you an exact dollar value, simply because interest rates are always changing. When I've looked at it in prior years, again, the portion increase, you would have a large portion increase to do with revenue, but it's proportional. So if we had way higher interest rates than we currently have, it would end up with a bigger dollar value. Right now, interest rates are incredibly low, and so dollar value-wise, it will be less. However, when I'm looking at prior years, I wouldn't be surprised if you had at least an extra $50,000 a year in revenue from the change.
Just as a follow-up, you can't get lower risks than GICs, term deposits, and the money market fund. So anything you move off of from that to bonds or whatever is increased risk. That's the reality. That's why they pay a higher return. It comes with increased risk. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens if you follow the predictions on the bond market. So hopefully we don't put all our eggs in that basket because we're predicting some scary things for bonds. So,
Throw the dice, Denise. Throw
well,
the
no,
dice.
it was on taxpayer money.
Councillor Colson.
Yeah, I had questions along Councillor Haynes' line. Like, you had made the comment that we could, I think you said it wouldn't change the risk or no change in risk?
Yeah.
Is that
That's the desire.
Yeah.
In a way, I would almost consider it to lower risk because you would have greater potential for investment, so you would have a greater diversity of investment. So if in one area it didn't do so well, it would be balanced out in other areas and vice versa.
How much money do we invest?
It fluctuates through the year. So right now, as we're getting into property tax time, we're going to have a lot more
Average
revenue,
number.
and then it goes throughout the year. But we're looking at, I'd say, on average during year, $5 million.
Right. Okay. You mentioned in your report historically outperformed the money market funds, the bond funds historically outperformed money.
Within MFA.
Yeah. What were those historical rates? I'm trying to actually get
So
the
for the
rates,
last
yeah.
year with bond, I think it's been about 1.7%, where, for example, right now our investments with the bank, you're about 0.5, 0.6% for a lot of them.
Okay.
I can give you, if you go to MFA's website, it shows for all three of them, it shows the historic since the inception of them, and it shows you 1 year average as well.
So with the bond fund, I know this might be considered micromanaging a bit, but given that we're asked to approve it, no, really, if we're asked to approve investment of $5 million of money, I guess I should just go research what that fund looks like. I'm assuming there's no minimum return on it, like some of these other structured funds where there's a guaranteed rate if the market falls. Nothing like that in place?
No, there's not.
Okay.
Most municipalities within the province do invest through MFA.
No, that I'm fine with. It's just the mode of the investment. Because going back to what Councillor Haynes said, central banks of this world indeed get out of negative interest rates or off of zero-bound interest rates, bond markets are going to get absolutely killed. And so if we now have some portion of $5 million in a bond fund that could almost get wiped out, in a matter of speaking, I'm not so comfortable approving that right now, unless there's some more safety measures in place.
Yeah. Keep in mind that we're not approving directly an investment into the bond fund. We are laying out the possibilities, and it's up to staff to manage that risk-return aspect. So in times when bond funds theoretically are beneficial, that's a direction staff has the ability to go. When the markets begin to turn, they go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's not directly saying this one.
Right.
It's just laying that groundwork. And there is a notation there that they are, I believe, required to report to council if there's any sort of significant change. I don't remember the specific paragraph, but any deviations from expected must be reported immediately to council and appropriate action taken to control and minimize adverse development. So it's something where there is a reporting mechanism if things deteriorate.
Right. Because, sorry, I'll keep rounding, because when things go south, the focus is on return of capital, not return on capital. So, I think I heard $50,000, so that's not insignificant, but at what risk are we accepting to chase a higher return?
And the other thing with MFA is it's not just us.
Oh no, it's all municipalities. Yeah.
Just a question to staff. On borrowings through MFA, there's a I'm going to call it a kickback at the end of your borrowing if they performed well.
Through MFA, they have something called a sinking fund. So the amount that we pay, they take it and they invest it. Historically, they've estimated the return that they would be able to get at 4%. Because interest rates have been so low over the last couple of years, they just recently reduced that to an estimate of 3.5%. But it is still quite high. And so it actually reduces the cost for municipality to borrow through MFA considerably.
Okay. So it gives you an idea of some of the performance historically. Anything further on the policy? All those in favor? Motion carried. Which gives us the public participation. Public. No, you look this way.
John Q. Public. Well, thank God you voted the way you did on the water issue. The water issue being the most sensitive issue in this community. There is no way anyone should even contemplate changing the standards at this point in time. In May 2016. Maybe in the future you can address it, but maybe you should address good management of the water that does fall on this community in certain times of the year and how you capture that and store it for the times when we're suffering from drought time. But you should be looking to the future for doing that, and there are probably ways with federal money or funds or whatever, or provincial or municipal. Anyway, thank goodness you did that. On the issue of when we had a public meeting in Coston Hall, I agree with the two councillors that it was something to be proud of. It was well led, it was well presented. The First Nations, I saw, of all the times I've been in any meetings where any representation of the First Nations have been there, I felt that they were really happy to be there. They were involved, and the chief was involved, and his humour and so on. It was a credit to this community. I felt very proud of the whole event. I thank everyone who had any involvement with putting it together, particularly Trudy with her crab cakes. And, she and my wife Carol, I know, have exchanged on the crab cake issue since then. But it was a really, really perfect evening. Thanks again. I will follow, if I can, with bated breath, your investment policy. Just because obviously there's nothing out there. So if you guys can do better than anyone I know, then I'm going to listen. Maybe gold is the way.
There be extra funds.
Maybe some gold bars.
Anyway, thank you very much, and thanks for doing what you did on the water issue. I thought it was full of common sense, his recommendation, and it was a no-brainer. You had to put it through. Sorry for the two councillors who disagree.
Any additional public participation? None. Motion to adjourn by Councillor Neary, second by Councillor Hain. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And just for the information of the people out there, Town Hall meeting water Thursday, June the 2nd, 2016, 6 p.m. at Coston Hall.